Welcome back to SuiteScript Stories. My name is Eric Grubaugh, and I am joined by my tasteful co-host, Tim Dietrich. How's it going, Tim?
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Today we have a guest with us. Adam Smith is a senior NetSuite developer and the creator of the SuiteAdvanced Chrome extension for NetSuite. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah. This is a very cool product. I'm very interested to hear about like the technical experience of building this. So I am going to kick it to Tim first to maybe talk about your background a little bit and how we got to SuiteAdvanced.
Yeah, so Adam, I was looking at your LinkedIn, and I think before the show we were talking a little bit. You said you had done a little bit of NetSuite work for, I don't know whether it was a customer or a company that you were working with, but your first, I think, experience as like a consultant was with a company called, I believe it's pronounced Nexa.
Yeah, Nexa is a NetSuite solution provider in Australia, and I actually moved there for a couple of years to work for them, and that's definitely how I got my first consulting experience, and it was I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's a big move. Was that something that you were looking for, like specifically when, you took that job, like to have the opportunity to move overseas, or did it just sort of present itself?
Yeah, good question. Actually, the motivation for the move was because of my wife. She actually wanted to study abroad at a school that's only in Australia. And so that's actually what sparked interest of us going over there. We had a son at the time, and so we looked into what that would take, to all of us going on over there, getting visas and all that. And it was actually a complicated process. And one of the requirements was I needed to have a job while I was over there. Makes sense, of course. But so I ended up applying for a working visa, and that ended up taking almost a year to approve. And once it was approved, I was able to work fully. I was able to work before that, however, on a temporary visa. But the reason I bring up that it took a while is because my wife and son actually weren't able to be in the country with me while I was on that temporary visa. So I was actually there for almost a year by myself, just doing NetSuite consulting without them. So just waiting for a visa to approve with no ETA,
Wow.
It was
Well, it sounds like the stars aligned though, because what a great opportunity to kind of get started as a consultant and developer. So before that though, you said you had done some NetSuite work. What had you done?
Yeah. So before that, I was actually working for a NetSuite customer. I was working for them just as like a general IT / like programmer on their website. And they actually migrated to NetSuite while I was there. And I was just fortunate enough to just fall into NetSuite and start getting experience there. And that's kind of what sparked my interest in finding a job dedicated to just working with NetSuite.
That's pretty cool. Sounds like you were in the right place at the right time, for sure.
Absolutely.
Classic.
I remember hearing both of you talk about how you got into NetSuite on episode 1, and you both kind of mentioned how you just kind of sort of fell into it as well. And I
Classic
think that
story.
happens to a lot of people.
Yep.
Yeah,
It was an accident.
I don't think NetSuite's been around long enough for people to say, that when they were growing up, they said, one day I'm going to be a NetSuite developer. Although it's getting there, like the age of NetSuite's getting to that point. Our kids maybe, I don't know. Like, yeah, I want to do what Dad did, which I don't think they do. But you never know. So what led you? Go ahead.
My son's actually saying that now, not NetSuite specifically, but he's saying he wants to do development.
Nice.
So I've actually been teaching him on the side. He's only 8 right now, but he's been having a really big interest in it, actually. So
yeah,
very cool. That's fun.
It's amazing how kids get into it so early now. It's like the opportunities are there. Whether it's doing mods for Minecraft or some kind of crazy Python thing that they're doing, robots.
Yeah.
It's a very different world. So what led you from Alexa to SCS Cloud?
Yeah, so after we were my family and I were in Australia for a little while. My wife had finished her schooling over there, and we decided let's head back to the US. And initially, I decided to try working remotely for the company in Australia for a while, and that ended up being a little difficult just with the time change. And so I decided to just go ahead and look for a new company here in the US. And um, it was actually there's actually kind of a coincidence around that. I actually found a recruiter who was recommending this job to me, and I had a reference on my resume, who was actually a friend of mine from a previous job, and he actually said, "Hey, I know this company who's looking for someone. I think you'd be a good fit." And it was actually the same company that I was already working with, so it ended up being like a small world type situation.
Nice.
That's pretty awesome. So SCS, I think, is based out of Tampa. Are you there as well? Is that where you're based now?
I'm close. I am in Florida. I'm about an hour south of the main office. So I do travel there maybe like once a month or so.
Hmm, pretty cool. So I know, or I think, since you've been there, one of the things that I think you worked on for SCS is Super Sync email for Outlook. Is that right? And can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what is it,
Yeah,
and how did you end
yeah,
up on that
sure.
project?
Yeah, no problem. So I that was actually one of the very first projects I was handed when I started at SES Cloud. When I had arrived, they had started this project a little bit, but it was nowhere near completion. And so they had parts in Outlook developed and they had parts in NetSuite developed, and they could kind of talk to each other. But it was far from being an actual product. It was more of like a concept, and the framework had been built. And so my first task was just to start, you know, tackling Jira tickets and come up with my own designs for things and different features that I thought would be appropriate for this type of product, and just really turn it into an actual product that could be sold. And that's what I ended up doing. So, and it was really just me, one other person who's a developer working on like a middleware between NetSuite and Outlook, and a project manager and a QA person. It's just the four of us kind of working on this together.
Interesting. On the Outlook side, was it like a plugin or something that you needed to build, or like how
Yeah,
did you
sure.
go about working on that?
Yeah. So like on the Outlook side, it's actually what Microsoft calls an add-in,
Mhm.
and it's developed in Angular, and
Okay.
it's essentially it's a UI for allowing a user to search for NetSuite records, and then basically log an email to one or more NetSuite records that they find, and it just creates a message record on the record and allows that history to be seen inside of Outlook. There's also
Very cool.
features that let you create records like entities. So if you have a new lead coming through, you can create the lead through Outlook and then log your communication to it right away.
It's very cool.
Awesome.
So I'm going to shut up in a minute, but I think that's your stepping stone from that to SuiteAdvanced. Is that right?
Actually, no, not even close.
Okay. Well, I'll let Eric ask a whole bunch of questions. I thought it was an easy segue, but I guess not.
Can you give us a quick rundown of what SuiteAdvanced is?
Oh man, there's no such thing as a quick rundown. Um, it's for probably the highest level is it's a NetSuite extension that just does a million things. There's no one focus. Probably if I had to choose a focus, it would just be to enhance NetSuite, uh, and make everyone's lives more efficient.
Yeah, I look at it for me, looking at it from the outside, it's improving the user experience of NetSuite. And it does that in a lot of different ways. Um, can you, and it maybe very more specifically, it is a Chrome extension, right? Maybe we should say that. It is a Chrome browser extension that enhances and modifies the NetSuite user interface, right?
Right.
What was the motivation for building this? It's very different from other browser extensions we might see. There's quite a few NetSuite browser extensions out there, but they are very tightly focused on like some super specific problem and to solve that one thing. SuiteAdvanced is not that. SuiteAdvanced does a bunch of. So why did you start this, and how did it get to where it is now?
So way back, probably 7 or 8 years ago, is when I started developing SuiteAdvanced.
Okay.
I started developing it literally at the first time I started getting NetSuite experience.
Okay.
At the time, I was really into developing Chrome extensions, and I would have I still do, but I have like a personal extension that I just run for myself on my own computer, and I just it runs on every website. And anytime I'm on a website and I'm thinking, wow, this website is lacking in some way, I bet I can improve that. I'll open up my Chrome extension and I'll write the code myself.
All right.
And literally that's how this started. I'm using NetSuite. It's a new website for me. And I'm thinking, oh wow, this is not, there's some lacking here. This isn't quite, there's some holes in this system. So let me see. I bet I can make that a little better to make my life a little bit easier. And eventually I kept doing that a lot. As you know, there's a lot of holes in NetSuite.
Right. Over and over.
So I just kept doing that more and more. And eventually, some people around me saw that my NetSuite looked a little bit and behaved a little bit differently than theirs. And, my coworkers and even the NetSuite consultants who the company I was working for hired to do the implementation, they were all like wondering like, well, why is yours different? And, so I'd explain it's this, and some of them would say like, how can I use that? Is that something I can do too? And
Yeah.
so I started, developing a way to let others use it as well, but just my friends. Then I moved to Australia and I started working at Nexa, and same thing happened. People were wondering like, how are you doing these things? So I decided, okay, I'll let some of you use it as well, and then after working at Nexa for a couple of years and moving back to the US is when I decided to actually start selling it, because not only are all my everyone I know is using it, but they're also consultants, and the clients are looking at their computer during screen sharing and meetings and seeing that their NetSuite is now looking different, and they're asking how they can use it now. So that's kind of when I got the idea, like, okay, maybe I should start like letting more than just my friends use it.
Yeah. There's something there, right? Creating this center of gravity, pulling people in every time they see it.
Do you remember what the first function was that you added to it when you were doing it just for yourself? Was it dark mode or something like that? I'm curious as to like what drove you crazy the most, where you're like, hey, I can fix that.
Oh man, now I gotta really think back. Think, and I could talk about some of the ones I know that were around the first. I'm not sure if they were
early
first,
ones. Fine. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a feature I have called Live View. I think I used to call it like auto refresh or something, but it's available on list views, and it's just a button that gets added with a little checkbox inside of it. And when you click it, it enables the contents of the page to automatically reload on an interval. So what inspired me to make this one way back when is during data migration from old system into NetSuite. Like maybe we'd be running a CSV import, and you open up after you submit the CSV import, you're looking at the page of historical imports, and that's it. You're just looking at this page that's frozen in time, and you literally have to click refresh on the browser just to see it update. So naturally, if you're importing hundreds, thousands of records, like you're going to be there a while just clicking update, refresh the page, just seeing it when it's going to be done, or you're going to go get coffee and come back and hopefully it's done then. whatever. But with the live view, you can just turn that on and just sit back. And you just glance at it every now and then, see when it's done.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
I think that's something we've all run into,
Yep.
refresh.
I want that on my script notes for sure. The execution logs.
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
The map reduce, bring it in a
it's
ton
on there
of-
now too. Yep.
Yep. Perfect. What was as you sort of look back, what are maybe some of the standout like technical challenges maybe? So maybe one of the more significant technical challenges, one of the tougher features you've had to implement, or maybe bugs to fix, perhaps.
Well, so to think about like an individual feature, I could do that in a sec, but I think the first thing that came to my mind is
Sure.
just the most difficult part about the whole thing in general is just to keep it compatible with NetSuite as it changes with each update. I could have a bunch of things working perfectly, but they all rely on one piece of NetSuite to keep working the same way.
Mhm.
And
Right.
sometimes NetSuite changes that one small piece and it messes up a lot of it. So I have to go back and sometimes recreate features from the ground up. And but I have a huge motivation to do that again. And a lot of times when I recreate the feature, I'm not just simply recreating exactly what it was, but it'll actually be newer and better and enhanced than it was as well. So going back to the drawing board on something, you don't always do it exactly the same way. So I think probably the biggest one, like last year, what was it, 2023.1, I think they redid the whole menu system. Like NetSuite did. They
Okay.
like the whole background, like it might have looked the same on the outside, but the internal
Right.
part was completely different.
Okay.
And so I did have a lot of features that were reliant on the menu HTML,
Mhm.
looking exactly the same every time, you load the page.
Right.
And so a lot of that changed. And I ended up making a lot more cooler ways to use the menu. I actually found some ways to basically inject what I needed into the page much better than what it was before, because of the way NetSuite's now doing things differently. And there were like pros and cons to it. It was like
Right. Yeah.
so I've got like a love or hate relationship with NetSuite updates. Sometimes they're pretty good, but sometimes like it really can mess me up.
Right. 2 steps backward, but maybe 3 steps forward sometimes.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Once in a while, something changes and I'm pulling my hair out trying to figure out how to re-implement this. So I may have to shelve it for a month or two, and then when I come back, then sometimes I'll get some
Mhm.
ideas and get back to it.
That is often the best way to solve a problem. Just walk
Yeah.
away from it
Yeah.
and do something else for a while.
Get some distance and some time.
Yeah. You
So-
mentioned
Okay,
the motivation. Like you have this big motivation to come back and keep fixing it. What is that motivation? What keeps you coming back and adding new features?
Okay, so I think that's two different questions. So I'll answer them both.
Sure.
Yeah, so the motivation, I mean, just to keep going really is I just have a strong desire to make users more efficient, I guess. It's more so the opposite. Not that I have the desire to make them more efficient, it just irritates me when it's not efficient.
Yeah. I know
So
that feeling very
it gives
well.
me the desire. And it's more than just with NetSuite, it even affects my life, right? Like, so
Mhm.
if I'm just living my life and maybe I see my wife doing something that I feel like, man, this could be way more efficient, and I'll make something, in the physical world that helps her in some way. It's definitely something I just love doing. And I love, especially when someone realizes that, wow, this is way better than it was. And I love this now, just that, just somebody's reaction to that is definitely something that drives me.
Awesome.
And I think with NetSuite, you've got people sitting in front of that all day, every day, hours after hour, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you can improve their experience, even just a little bit, it's a little bit every day, right? And I guess over time, it's like easy to take for granted, oh yeah, I forgot that if I don't have the plugin installed, I'm back
Oh
to
yeah.
like, whatever it is, like you lose dark mode or whatever other feature that they are, excited about. Are there
Yeah,
any features that you kind of like have on your like a wish list, but you're just totally blocked on it, like you can't do, at least not yet, like technically?
oh man, I really don't have many. I mean, I do have like a kind of a to-do list sort of, but it's there's just some like random things here and there. They're nothing too big. Usually if it's something that I like, if it's an idea that I have, like I'll just get to work on it as soon as I possibly can, just to keep going. I get excited about it, and that's just all I want to do. Like if I have an idea for a new feature, man, that's just all I'm working on.
Mhm. I
I,
think
I,
Eric and I can relate to that. That's the
Yeah.
sleepless nights, or your wife's like, what were you doing at 3 o'clock in the middle of the night on your
oh my
computer?
gosh, it's so true.
Yeah, or where'd the weekend go?
I got a
So
call from her at like 3 a.m. saying, "What are you doing? You need to go to bed. You have
yeah,
to be up soon."
that's pretty cool. So I have a kind of interesting, I guess, question for you. I think it's interesting. Like, when I put out the SuiteQL query tool, it took a little while, but then all of a sudden I started to get emails from people that were worried about the security of it, right? They're like, is this thing safe? And I would imagine you probably get those too, right? Or, you know, my boss won't let me install it because, do you get that? You get those inquiries and concerns?
Actually, no, I don't think I can relate in that way.
Really?
Um,
Interesting.
I wonder, the differences between them, but it could be more so that what you've developed is like an actual script inside of a NetSuite account.
Hmm.
So maybe it could be more concerning because where the code actually lives,
Right.
whereas mine is kind of like an outer layer that gets installed in the browser.
Yeah, they don't even know that it's installed.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Just the
that's
user
true.
does. But yeah, very interesting.
But
Cool.
I have had people reach out with very technical questions. No, it hasn't been common, but there have been some. Even so far as to saying like, their company actually requires them to fill out this really long form for any new tool that they want to use.
Hmm.
And so they just give it to me and say, "Can you fill this out so that I can use this?" And,
Nice.
it's going to take me hours just to fill this out, but you know, um, so I sometimes have to weigh the pros and cons. Like, is it just you using this, or is it going to be maybe more than one?
Right. Wow, that's
Hmm.
crazy.
Now, it's just you developing this, right? You don't have there's no team here. It's all Adam Smith, right?
Yeah, that's right. It is just me. It's always been just me with this, and it 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 could partially be because I have trust issues, but but I don't think it's really uh, come up before. Like no one's actually said like, "Hey, would you like help with this?" or um, you know, or really a need just yet. My
Hmm.
so far my the time of each day, it does feel like I need more hours per day to do everything I'm doing, but so far it's not impossible. It might get there eventually, but at this moment it's still a bit manageable.
It's pretty cool. Well, it seems like it's extremely popular in the community. You see people talking about it on the NetSuite professional Slack. I've seen people chatting about it on Reddit. It's like it just seems like it's really taking off. So that's great. Congratulations on the
Yeah,
what
congratulations.
seems to be success of it. So that's pretty cool. Um, if you had this all to do over again, is there anything you would do differently? Like with how you're releasing it or pricing it? Because it's a subscription, right? I think it's either
Yeah, it's $8 per month.
okay. Yeah.
Um, yeah, man, doing it differently. I feel like I'm always just kind of figuring it out as I go. So, and I don't really think about the future of it too much because I'm kind of more of just a now type of person. Like, what can I do right this second?
Mhm.
And It's probably not wise. I need to be thinking more about the future with it, um, but as for like, what would I do? What would I do differently if I could? Um, and I probably would have started, like, I probably would have released it as a product way sooner. Because it's only been out for maybe a couple of years, but like I said, I started developing it maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
Mhm.
And if I had maybe had that mindset of, how can I get this out the door and started sooner? I probably could have gotten it out maybe, 6 years ago instead of 2. But I just had no
Does
idea what was going to happen.
For sure, yeah. Does releasing it and pushing it out to the public and selling it particularly, has that taken away any of the like this was born out of the joy of smoothing out friction, right? Making your own job more efficient, more effective, making you faster. Does publishing it, does sharing it with the public, does selling it take any of that joy away? Or is it still like that same feeling of like, I'm just doing this to make my job easier, and guess what? That makes a ton of other people's jobs easier too.
Um, yeah, I mean I think it's changed a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, honestly, probably just for the better, really, um, like, when I first started, like I was only making myself in my life easier with this
Right.
stuff, right? So when other people started showing interest in it, that's when I started seeing like, oh wow, this feels good, like helping other
Yeah.
people, you know, um, and so now I just feel like I'm helping a lot more people than I was before. There's a little bit of extra work with, providing support for it,
Right.
but I'm okay with that. I really love talking to my users and understanding their concerns, or if there's a problem they have, like I want to tackle it immediately. I want to know, like, if we can't figure it out in like a couple of emails, like I'm sending a meeting link and I'll meet with you personally. Let's figure this out. um, I don't want you to be like paying for something you can't use, for instance, or
Right. Yeah.
um, but yeah. So I think, just as much as I love it when people's lives are easier, I also love it when I'm able to resolve their issue so that way they can keep using something. So like, yeah, it's definitely different. But I would say it's different for the better.
Excellent.
I'm going to
What we
take a
want, right?
step. Yeah, that's what you want. I'm going to take a step back a little bit. You mentioned that you had been developing from extensions prior to even being exposed to NetSuite. But what got you interested in those to begin with?
Oh wow, now we're talking a long time ago. Let me
Uh,
see here.
Uh-oh.
Um, Let me see. So I think I started developing extensions. It was at my very first technical job. Um, yeah, I mean at that company, they were using Salesforce, and that was the first extension I developed was for Salesforce,
hmm,
and that was not like for public use. That was just for private use within the company, basically. So, but really the same thing. I'm using Salesforce, and I'm thinking, how can this be better?
Yeah.
And Salesforce doesn't have as many, you know, coding opportunities as NetSuite does. But at the time, I didn't even know what NetSuite was, so I wasn't thinking about that. But so I think first things I looked into was how can I, make this, how can I improve this thing, Salesforce? Um, and so I looked into, all the different ways it can be customized, and it was very limited. Couldn't do a lot of these things, and I found kind of like a hack with Salesforce you can kind of do, where you can kind of inject code um, in a way that's not intended.
Sure.
Um, they had like a sidebar, on Salesforce. I don't know if you know what
Mm.
Salesforce looks like, but at least back then they had a left sidebar, and you could put like little widgets on there, and you could even put like a custom one, like with custom JavaScript and CSS and HTML.
Okay.
And it wasn't sandboxed, so you could easily
Oops.
just have code there that would interact with the rest of the web page. So that's the very first thing that I tried doing, and it actually worked pretty well for a while. So I actually had to like enhance experience for people doing things that Salesforce wasn't designed to do just through that. And then one day, Salesforce kind of got wise to it, and they put a stop to that. No longer possible. So that's when I started struggling to figure out, okay, now we have these processes that I created that don't work anymore. And, I've got people higher ups, thinking like, oh, this person, Adam created these things and they're not working, he's got to fix them, So now I'm tasked with how can I fix this? So injecting code into Salesforce from Salesforce seemed like a dead end. There's no way I could do that anymore. So that's when I found, maybe I can make an extension. I could just have everyone in the company install this extension and I'm golden. So that's what I did. I learned how to make extensions. I remember doing a beta test with just this coworker across the room, just saying like, can you test this now? Does this work? And doing something, and I was like, oh, cool. Hey, 1 second, go back to my computer and I do something. Okay, how about now? Does it work now? And back then, like the review process for Chrome extensions was like just about non-existent. You could push up a new version of an extension and it was out like in an instant. And I think it's better now. They have some security and reviewing, so it's good because there were some malicious extensions. There have been, but yeah, that's how I got into the extensions. And eventually the Salesforce extension that I made got really big within the company. Like it got really complex. There were a lot of functions, a lot of features, and people requesting things, and my boss coming to me and saying, hey, can you do this, can you do that? And so then eventually it came time for me to leave that company and I moved to another one. But my love for extensions was so great still, and I really loved it. I ended up making another one for the next company I was at, but not relating to Salesforce or NetSuite, just some other tools that they had. And then that's maybe about a year or two after that is when they decided to do a NetSuite implementation. And you hear the beginning of that story, and that's how I got there.
So again, you were in the right place at the right time. I think should be the title of maybe this episode.
Right. So true.
It's really interesting to me because up until I'd seen what you were doing, it never occurred to me that was a pretty interesting way, not just to customize like NetSuite, we'll pick on that, but to run code in the browser, in a web-based app. And specifically when you think about NetSuite, you're able to do it everywhere. It doesn't have to be a scriptable record. So you can actually run it right off the dashboard, right? I mean, it's pretty cool. So I love the idea of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that reminds me of one feature I have. I call it just like global scripts, where the user, if they're technical enough, and they need to, they can actually write a script that runs on every page inside of NetSuite.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty cool. So you mentioned the review process for plugins, and it sounds like it's a little bit longer now. It takes a little bit longer than before, but is that tough? I mean, like when you submit, have you ever had one kick back to you and be like, hey, like Adam, what are you doing?
As a matter of fact, I have. So I think Google kind of went through like a trial and error phase of extension, like reviewing. And I think it was a big response to, the news of a lot of malicious extensions being in their store. They had to respond to that. And so they immediately, that's right when the review process got really strict. And I could tell that they just didn't really have a process yet. It almost seemed like they were just like, all right, we need to hire like 100 people just to like literally go line by line to each one of these code, extensions code and just see like if there's anything in there, and I mean, that's just my mind thinking about it, but they probably didn't have that, but just, it just certainly seemed like it because the review process started getting longer, and definitely more strict. And there were some things I had to change in my extensions that were basically allowed before, but now they're no longer allowed. So I had to figure out ways to get around that and programming them differently. But I would say, yeah, I'm trying to remember that there was one time that was extremely annoying where they actually rejected my submission. I'm trying to remember exactly what that was. It was like, I can't remember the exact reason. It was nothing malicious I was doing of any sort, of course, but it was just something, I think it was a new requirement that they had put in place. And I didn't, I like almost met it, but I wasn't quite there.
Yeah.
And the thing is with them is there's no way to talk to a human in the whole process.
Yeah.
So it's all just emails. You know, you submit it on their interface and then you just wait and you pray.
Yeah.
And it was, I think it was like 2 weeks for this review process, and then
Wow.
it came back and said it was rejected. And the reason is just such an automated, like maybe 8 word, not even a sentence, why it's rejected.
Right.
And the first thing I got to do is like, what does this mean? Let me Google this.
Super vague. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very similar, I think, to what happens. And it's hard to say whether it's still this way with iOS because I don't submit many to the store for public use. But with Apple, with iOS apps, it used to be that like the response time would vary, like could get approved the same day or like a couple days later. It was when it started to take a while. And it's like, hey, it's been 2 weeks. That's when you start getting nervous. You're like, oh boy. But then, and I've heard a lot of horror stories about that kind of thing too, where, really there is a human involved in some cases. And so you could resubmit it with no change and you get approved the next. It just depends on who had eyes on it, right?
Yeah, well,
But yeah, then there's the obscure error messages coming back or the policy changes that you're not aware of that don't really apply to you. I remember with iOS, it was kind of like, does it involve content that was like not unsuitable for children or something like, it's like, well, it's a business app, like, it's just goofy stuff. So anyway, I'm glad to hear that, like, for the most part, it seems like that's gone pretty smoothly for you. Do you ever get involved in developing plugins that are custom for clients? And does any of this ever apply to I'll call it your day job?
yeah,
Do you
sure.
get asked to do that?
I don't think, no, I don't think I've ever like created like a custom one for a client. Certainly that's come up as an idea in the past. A lot of times, I say a lot, but a lot of times a client will say, I want NetSuite to do this. And as a NetSuite consultant who has to abide by the way NetSuite works, you have to say, sorry, that's not possible. However, I won't say it's impossible. Maybe it's just not possible with native NetSuite. This is an idea we could do around this way, but I don't think anyone's actually followed through with that idea. But certainly, my two roles do overlap sometimes, where maybe one of my customers will actually reach out to me and say, "Hey, do you do any custom development for NetSuite?" And I'll say, "Well, I do, but it's through my, the consultant I work for," and then I'll make the connection, and they'll be a new client of ours. And that does happen, semi-frequently. And then it definitely goes the other way around where, one of my coworkers is, working with one of our clients and they kind of see, oh, why is your NetSuite different? Oh, this is SuiteAdvanced, go check it out. And then I'll get customers that way too. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Any plans? You kind of mentioned you live in the now and don't think about the future too much, but any plans of growing it beyond Chrome, like going into other browsers?
Yeah, I mean, so right now I wouldn't say it's just Chrome, it's Chromium-based browsers.
Okay.
So a lot of browsers now are adopting Chromium, like Edge and Opera, and there's a few other lesser known ones. But so I guess the only ones that wouldn't support now is just like Safari and Firefox. Those are probably the most common ones that
Gotcha.
are not supported. Firefox, maybe. I do have some extensions for Firefox now that are just open source, public free use. And it's not too different from Chromium based. There's just some differences here and there that kind of make it much more annoying, I guess. If you're only developing for Firefox or you're only developing for Chromium, it's not that bad. But since there are some differences, like there is an extension I have that's supported on both of them, and I've had to make kind of like a compiling script that basically automatically changes parts of the code just so that it's compatible with both browser types. So that that little bit can be a little bit of an annoyance, but yeah, I've certainly thought about adding Firefox support at some point, but the need hasn't been huge yet. I think I've had like 1 or 2 users ask about it over 2 years, and so it hasn't really been big. But as for like Safari support, I don't know. I can't see myself probably ever adding Safari support, at least not anytime soon. I know there's like they now require you to pay to be like a developer in their ecosystem. So like you have to pay the $100 a year. I think I don't know if it's more now, but just to be a developer.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know nothing about their review process or anything, but it's definitely a different animal that I haven't really wanted to get near.
We'll make it 3 votes for Firefox. I would also upvote that feature.
Nice.
You got
Okay.
one for Safari or WebKit, depending on how you want to word it.
I knew
But
that was
yeah.
coming.
Yeah, just one. Yeah, no, I don't blame you. I mean, I can imagine that it is very different, and the investment in your time to like create one for Safari would probably, I mean, it'll probably be a long time before you felt like, oh yeah, I've got 5 users now that are using that version of it. It'd be easier to just convince me to switch to Chrome, right? So,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
and if I were smart, I probably would. Yeah, you never know what you're going to get with Safari, for better or worse. So I want to switch gears a little bit, Eric. Unless do you want to ask a little bit more about the plugin, or?
No, please go ahead.
Okay, so the other thing I wanted to ask you about was I always sort of like check people out on LinkedIn, and I was looking at your feed and I saw that last year SuiteWorld you participated in the hackathon. I think they call it the Hackathon for Good, and your team won. But what was that like, and what did your team do?
Yeah, it was really exciting, man. It was the best feeling ever when they announced, like that my team is the winner. We were all ecstatic. But yeah, as for what it was, so the just to give a little background of what the Hackathon for Good is. Every year, NetSuite chooses a nonprofit organization to be represented at the hackathon. And then during the hackathon, they essentially discuss a problem or a new enhancement that this nonprofit needs in their NetSuite environment. And then there's usually about like 8 to 10 teams of around like 6 to 8 people each, who are all tasked with trying to come up with the best solution to this problem. And this was my second year participating in it, and yeah, the previous year I just simply showed up and organized my team right then and there and tried to figure out like who would be good members to be on this team, to accomplish this task that we know nothing about. And that was a challenge, just trying to meet people. And it's kind of like you have an alternative motive, when you're talking to somebody like, are you good at what you do, and but this year, since I knew what was expected, I basically organized my team in advance, and just contacted people I know who are good at what they do and who I knew were going to SuiteWorld and said, hey, if you're not doing the hackathon, you should do the hackathon. Let's be on a team together. And that's how I organized my team. And yeah, it's when we got there. Let me explain what the issue was too this year. So the nonprofit this year was Capital Area Food Bank, and they are located in DC. And what they do is they distribute food to a whole bunch of different food centers, to feed the hungry. And what they the problem that they had was it was difficult to maintain the most up-to-date information from all these distribution centers. So, for instance, like if they know this center is located in this area, they're going to just, when the food becomes available, they're going to send the food to that location. But what would happen sometimes is maybe that location would actually move. They'd go somewhere else and they'd be located somewhere completely different now. And, Capital Area Food Bank would have no idea, and they'd send the food to the wrong place. And that could result in the food spoiling and not not given to anyone. So their solution at the moment was they hired a temp to literally call every single center twice a year just to make sure their details are accurate still. And that cost them a lot of money just to have somebody on there. What if this could actually be automated, and what if the centers could actually enter the details themselves and be reminded to do so when they order food. And that was the solution that we came up with, was to essentially when they log on to the website to go and order food, they use SuiteAdvanced, by the way, to essentially have it in their face to say, like, okay, you're ordering food, that's great. Are you sure it's going to the right location? Here are your current details. Make sure they're accurate. And then there was another part of the problem too, where there's all these legal documents that they have to have in order to be this type of participating center, and they needed a way to kind of organize all those instead of just via email. So that's another part of it, where their centers now can log in and see a list of all of their current documents and upload new ones to replace them. And then there was one more other part, three parts. They wanted a way for their centers to enter in hours of operation, so that they didn't deliver food at the wrong time, especially wrong location.
Get there, nobody's there, or it's after hours where they can take deliveries and stuff like
Right.
that. So did you guys actually build the solution at the event? I mean, did you hack it all out and get it working, or is it just kind of conceptualizing what the solution or solutions might be?
Yeah, good question. So the first year we did this, we're not experienced. We didn't know what we were doing. We did all the development right then and there. We made a perfect solution that worked well, but we did not win. So the second year came through, and kind of realized that the solution that we come up with doesn't actually have to be perfectly working. It can be more of a concept. As long as it's actually plausible and can be done with NetSuite, then that's fine. And so that's kind of what we focused on this time. We did do a little bit of development and a little bit of work inside NetSuite to kind of create some of these moving parts, just to make it easy to envision what our idea was. But other than that, it was just a bunch of mock-ups. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And so funny thing, I did actually try to do some development in SuiteAdvanced while we were there, but it ended up not really being possible in the amount of time that we had. I'm not sure if you've ever worked with SuiteAdvanced, but it's extremely complicated, and there's a reason there are so few people on Earth who know anything about it. I used to be a SuiteAdvanced developer, so I know what it's like, but it's been a while now, and SuiteAdvanced changes so often. They add new major concepts quite frequently. But I actually was working with they actually had NetSuite provided two SuiteCommerce Advanced gurus to be available to all the teams while we were there. And I actually had one of them sitting with me for 2 hours trying to set up the development environment.
Wow.
And we finally got it set up after 2 hours. But if if one of the developers who actually developed SuiteCommerce Advanced can't get it set up and running in the amount of time it takes to do the hackathon, then I wasn't sure exactly how they expected us to do that. But
Yeah, it's very different. I think
That's
I
telling.
haven't done a lot with it, but it's like if you're a SuiteScript developer, I don't know if it adds any value to your experience if you decide you're going to give SuiteCommerce Advanced a shot. To me,
it
it
does
didn't seem
slightly.
like it. Yeah, a
Slightly.
little
It
bit.
helps to know how NetSuite works as well, and
Yeah, right.
there is
What's
some
happening on the
overlap.
back end? Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. So, do you know if the what you guys had proposed and what won was it ever been deployed? Did
Oh yeah,
anybody? Yeah.
good question. Yeah, actually, that's the thing. After you come up with a solution and the winners are chosen, the winners basically get asked like, "Hey, so would you could you implement this now for this nonprofit?" And um, I was told by the organizers of the event that the last 2 years the winners did not actually go through with the implementation,
Hmm.
and I thought that was very sad. So
Mhm.
my team, fortunately, we were all very driven to actually implement our solution. So we actually started um, this past January, meeting regularly and actually working to implement this. And today, actually, just shortly before this call, we just met, and it's our solution's pretty close to being finished. So it's almost ready for the nonprofit.
That's very cool.
Very cool. Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the win too. The people that you had on your team, are they people that you had, I know you reached out to them ahead of time, but was it just sort of like a blind reach out? Like, hey, I see you've got like some SuiteCommerce Advanced expertise. I'd love to. Or was it just like, like, how did that go? How did you do it?
Yeah, funny enough, I was the only one on the team who actually had SCA experience, and I wasn't very good because it's been quite a while and it's changed a lot since then. But no, really it was just the pool of people I have to ask is quite small already, right? It's they have to be already going to SuiteWorld,
Mhm.
and then on top of that, I've got to know them, right? Because I'm not just going to reach out to some stranger, and that's basically what I did the first year, but in person. So I
Mhm.
want to know something about this person beforehand. So um, it's a bunch of different types of people. There's some people I worked with um, in the past, or I kind of know through SES Cloud. Didn't work at SES Cloud, but I know through them. Um, like uh, like there's one who was associate with SES, not working but works with. There was one of the people was actually a client of SES Cloud. I actually convinced him to go to SuiteWorld with us, and he said, okay, well, if I go, I will definitely join your hackathon team, and he ended up doing it. And then another member was the president of the Rocky Mountain NetSuite user group,
Mhm.
so he definitely up for it, and then he brought two people that he knew on top of that as well. So I knew everybody except for three people on the team prior, and there were I think seven of us.
Very cool. Do you think you'll go back this year and do it again? Give it another shot?
Oh, I definitely want to.
Yeah.
I think I will. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Eric, do you have anything else?
I don't think so. Adam, is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to bring up? Anything people should know about SuiteAdvanced? Anything like that?
Yeah, I would say, if anyone listening hasn't heard about SuiteAdvanced yet, please give it a try. SuiteAdvanced.com is how you can discover it. And I'm always open to feedback, your thoughts about anything. Don't think that I'm not approachable. I would love to hear from you. You just send me an email. It's on the website. I want to know your thoughts about it. And yeah, I think that's about it. Thanks so much for having me on the show, guys.
Of
Yeah,
course.
thanks
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for all your work on SuiteAdvanced and in the NetSuite community, and being so open and willing to hear feedback and listen to your users. That's difficult to do sometimes, but necessary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Tim, anything else?
I don't think so. Again, congratulations on the success of your product, your career, and for winning
Yeah.
in the hackathon last year. I'm real happy that you had a chance to join us and we got a chance to know you. I'd seen your name, in the community for a while, and yeah, it's always good to put a face to the name and get to know,
For sure.
other people in the community. So thanks again.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great to meet you guys in person officially, and I've always seen you guys from afar, and sort of looked up to you guys too with all your accomplishments. So it's a bit surreal for me to finally be talking to you guys. So thanks a lot.
Of course. All right. Well, thank you, Adam, for joining us. I will bring this episode of SuiteScript Stories to a close. If you'd like to get in touch with any of us, that information will all be in the show notes. Hope you join us next time as we continue to highlight interesting people and stories from the SuiteScript world. See you then.